They told me the Amityville basement was just a basement. They didn't mention the smell. Wet copper, sharp enough to stick to the back of my tongue. I found the source last Thursday, a wall I'd never noticed before, pale and webbed with hairline cracks like veins under skin. When I pressed my ear to it, I heard breathing on the other side, slow, heavy, patient. That night, the wall was gone. In its place stood a small room, no bigger than a coffin, lit by nothing but the deep red glow of its own walls. The air inside was hot and still, pressing in on me like it wanted to keep me there. I stepped closer, and a shadow slid across the floor. My shadow. Only it wasn't facing the wall the way I was. It was walking toward me. My name is Vincent Torino, and 3 months ago, I became the live-in caretaker for 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville. You know the address. Everyone does. The DeFeo murders, the Lutz family, all those books and movies. What they don't tell you is that someone still has to maintain the property. Someone has to keep the grass cut, the pipes working, the tourists from breaking in through the basement windows. I grew up 20 minutes away in Massapequa, so the Amityville stories were playground currency when I was a kid. Ronald DeFeo Jr. shooting his whole family while they slept. The Lutzes fleeing after 28 days of terror. George Lutz finding his wife levitating above their bed. Father Mancuso getting violently ill every time he tried to bless the house. Most of it sounded like bullshit to me. Still does, honestly. I needed the job. 3 years ago, my construction company went under when the Sunrise Highway expansion project got canceled. My wife Jennifer left me 6 months later, took our daughter Emma back to her parents in Garden City. The divorce cleaned out what savings I had left. By October, I was living in a studio apartment above Gino's Pizza on Merrick Road, eating day-old slices and watching help-wanted ads scroll past on my phone. The property management company, Suffolk Estate Services, posted the listing on Craigslist. Live-in caretaker needed for historic Amityville property. Housing provided. Must be comfortable working alone. Discretion required. The pay was double what I expected, enough to start putting money aside for lawyer fees, maybe get supervised visits with Emma again. The interview was at their office in Babylon. Ms. Patricia Holloway, a thin woman with steel gray hair, explained the basics. The house had been sold and resold a dozen times since 1975. Current owners lived in Florida and wanted someone on site for security and maintenance. Most importantly, I'd need to keep gawkers away and maintain privacy for the neighborhood. The previous caretaker left rather suddenly, she said, sliding a manila envelope across her desk. These are some guidelines he left behind. Nothing official, just suggestions from someone with experience. I should have read those papers right there in her office. Should have asked why the last guy left. Should have wondered why they needed a caretaker at all for a house that mostly sat empty. Instead, I signed the contract and moved in that weekend. The house looked smaller than I expected. 3 stories of white cedar shingles, black shutters framing quarter-moon windows that gave it those famous eyes. The real estate photos never captured how ordinary it seemed. Just another Dutch colonial on a street full of them, tucked between a yellow ranch and a brick Cape Cod. Mrs. Catalano from next door watched me unload my pickup truck. She'd lived there since the 60s, according to Ms. Holloway, and had opinions about every family that moved into 112 Ocean Avenue. I gave her a wave. She turned and went inside, curtains snapping shut. The key stuck in the front door lock. When it finally turned, the door swung open with a groan that sounded like it had been holding its breath. The smell hit me right away. Not the copper scent from the basement. Not yet. This was different. old wood polish mixed with something medicinal, like the nursing home where my father spent his last months. Suffolk Estate Services had furnished the place with basics: a brown couch that probably came from Raymore and Flanagan, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, a bed upstairs in what used to be the parents' bedroom. They'd left the walls bare, except for a few landscape prints that looked like they came from a doctor's office. I found the manila envelope on the kitchen counter, next to a set of keys and a business card for Tony's Hardware on Merrick Road. My name was written across the front in blue ballpoint. For Vincent, from Danny. Danny Mercado, the previous caretaker. Ms. Holloway mentioned he'd worked here for almost 2 years before quitting. Inside were 8 handwritten pages on yellow legal pad paper, the kind with faint blue lines. Danny's handwriting was careful, like he'd taken time with each letter. At the top of the first page, he'd written, "Protocols for 112 Ocean Avenue. Read these tonight. Protocol 1. Never enter the basement between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. The stairs will take you somewhere else during those hours, and you won't be able to find your way back until morning. Protocol 2. If you hear children playing upstairs after 10 p.m., do not investigate. They are not children, and they do not like to be interrupted. Stay on the first floor until the sounds stop. Protocol 3. The sewing room door, second floor, end of hallway, must remain closed at all times. If you find it open, close it immediately and leave a glass of salt water outside. Do not look inside while closing it. Protocol 4. When mowing the lawn, stay away from the southwest corner of the backyard where the old well used to be. The ground is unstable there, and things have a tendency to fall in. Protocol 5. If the bathroom faucets start running red water, let them run for exactly 7 minutes, then turn them off. Clean the tub and sink with bleach afterward. This happens about once a month. Protocol 6. Never answer the front door between midnight and sunrise, regardless of who appears to be knocking. They will sound like people you know. They are not. Protocol 7. If you smell roses in the basement, leave the house immediately and do not return for at least 4 hours. Wait in your truck at the Friendly's parking lot on Merrick Road. Protocol 8. Keep a crucifix in the master bedroom at all times, not for protection, for warning. When it falls off the wall, something is about to happen. Below the protocols, Danny had scribbled a note. Vincent, I lasted 2 years. The pay is good, but it's not worth it. These aren't suggestions. Follow them exactly, or you'll end up like the others. The basement wall I mentioned to Ms. Holloway, it's not the worst thing in this house. Be careful. DM. I read through the list 3 times, waiting for the punchline. Danny was either having an elaborate joke at my expense, or he genuinely believed this stuff. The protocols sounded like something from a horror movie, the kind of rules teenagers break one by one until they're all dead. But Danny's handwriting didn't look like someone joking around. The letters were pressed deep into the paper, like he'd been bearing down hard with the pen. In the margins, he'd added timestamps and dates. Protocol 2, confirmed November 15th. Protocol 6, do not test. I folded the papers and slipped them into my back pocket. Outside, a car door slammed. Through the front window, I watched a Suffolk County police cruiser pull away from the curb. Officer Kowalski, according to the nameplate. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, engine running. The sun was setting behind the houses across Ocean Avenue, throwing long shadows across the lawn. I had unpacking to do, dinner to figure out, a new life to start. Tomorrow I'd call Danny's number. Ms. Holloway had given me his contact information in case of questions about the property. But tonight, I'd follow his protocols, just to be safe. After all, what could it hurt? I spent the rest of Sunday unpacking and getting familiar with the house. The layout was straightforward. Living room and kitchen on the first floor, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, plus the basement Danny had warned me about. Each room felt like it was waiting for something, the way hotel rooms do before you've made them yours. The sewing room door at the end of the upstairs hallway was closed, just as Danny's notes specified. A simple wooden door painted white, brass knob that looked original to the house. Nothing special about it, except for the way my hand hesitated when I reached for the knob. I pulled back and headed downstairs instead. By dinner time, I'd managed to make the place feel almost normal. My toolbox sat on the kitchen counter next to a 6-pack of Budweiser from the Stop and Shop on Sunrise Highway. The television worked, picking up local channels that helped fill the silence. News 12 Long Island was running a story about construction delays on the Long Island Expressway. I called my daughter Emma around 8. Jennifer answered, her voice polite but distant, the way it had been since the divorce papers were signed. "Daddy." Emma's voice brightened the whole kitchen. "Where are you living now?" "A big house in Amityville," I told her, walking to the front window. Mrs. Catalano was watering her garden, sneaking glances at my truck in the driveway. "Maybe you can visit sometime." "Is it near the beach?" "Pretty close, sweetheart. Great South Bay is just a few miles away." We talked for 10 minutes about her new teacher at Garden City Elementary, about the art project she was making with popsicle sticks. When Jennifer took the phone back, the warmth disappeared. "Vincent, Emma's got school tomorrow, and we need to talk about Christmas arrangements." "Sure, whatever works. I'll call you later this week." The line went dead. I sat at the kitchen table, finishing my beer and listening to the house settle around me. Old homes make noise, pipes creaking, wood expanding and contracting, the furnace cycling on and off. This place seemed louder than most, but maybe that was just because I wasn't used to it yet. Around 9:30, I found myself reading Danny's protocols again. The handwriting looked even more urgent by lamplight, especially his warnings scribbled in the margins. Protocol 2, confirmed November 15th. What had he confirmed exactly? I was folding the papers when I heard it. Upstairs. A soft thump, like someone dropping a sneaker on the floor. The sound came again. Then another. Footsteps, light and quick, moving across the bedroom above the kitchen. Emma's footsteps sounded like that when she ran through our old house in Massapequa, back when we were still a family. I checked my watch, 10:17 p.m. Protocol 2. If you hear children playing upstairs after 10 p.m., do not investigate. They are not children, and they do not like to be interrupted. Stay on the first floor until the sounds stop. The footsteps picked up pace, joined by what sounded like a second set. Smaller feet, maybe a toddler learning to walk. They ran from one end of the upstairs hallway to the other, then back again. A game of tag or chase. My first instinct was to grab a flashlight and head up there. In my old life, strange noises meant checking for intruders, loose floorboards, maybe a raccoon in the attic. But Danny's notes sat on the table in front of me, and his handwriting didn't look like someone who scared easily. The running stopped. Then I heard laughter, high and sweet, like children discovering something wonderful. A girl's giggle, followed by a boy's deeper chuckle. They were having fun up there, whatever they were. I turned the television volume up and tried to focus on the late news. Traffic and weather every 10 minutes, a story about the Islanders losing to the Rangers. Normal stuff. But the sounds upstairs kept drawing my attention back. Furniture being moved, something rolling across the floor, a ball maybe, or a toy car. At 10:45, I heard singing. "Ring around the rosy," sung in two young voices that harmonized perfectly. They knew all the words, even the verses I'd forgotten. When they reached "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down," something heavy hit the floor directly above my head. Then silence. The quiet stretched for 5 minutes. I started to think it was over. Then came the laughter again, but different this time. Older. Adult voices mimicking children like grown-ups playing a cruel joke. The pitch was wrong, too high and too sharp. It made my teeth ache. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and looked up. The hallway was dark except for a sliver of light coming from under the sewing room door. But that was supposed to stay closed. Danny had been very specific about that. The laughter grew louder, echoing down the stairwell. Now it sounded like a whole group of kids, maybe a dozen or more. A birthday party or a sleepover, all of them hysterical about some shared joke. My phone showed 11:23 p.m. when everything stopped. Not gradually, just cut off mid-laugh, like someone had flipped a switch. The house fell into the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I waited another 20 minutes before going upstairs to check. The sewing room door was closed again, brass knob cool to the touch. No light underneath. The other bedrooms were empty, exactly as I'd left them. In the master bedroom, I found a wooden crucifix hanging above the bed that hadn't been there when I'd unpacked earlier. It was old, dark wood, worn smooth by decades of handling. A small brass plate at the bottom read, "Saint. Joseph's Parish, Amityville, 1974. I left it where it was. Protocol 8 said to keep it there for warning, not protection. When it falls, something is about to happen. That night, I slept with all the lights on. Monday morning arrived gray and humid, the kind of Long Island weather that makes your clothes stick to your skin before you've even had coffee. I'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, jumping awake every time the house made a sound. By 6 a.m., I gave up and headed to the kitchen. The crucifix was still hanging above the bed. I'd checked it twice during the night, half expecting to find it on the floor. Whatever Danny meant by, "when it falls, something is about to happen," it hadn't happened yet. I found Danny's phone number in the packet Ms. Holloway had given me. The call went straight to voicemail, a standard recording, nothing personal. I left a message asking him to call back, said I had questions about the property maintenance, didn't mention the protocols. Not yet. The morning routine felt good. Coffee in the kitchen, while News 12 played on the small television. Traffic report for the LIE, weather forecast calling for afternoon thunderstorms. Normal stuff that made the previous night seem like a dream, or maybe just the stress of sleeping in a new place. Around 8, I walked outside to get a better look at the property in daylight. The lawn needed work. Dandelions poking through patchy grass, leaves collecting against the foundation. The southwest corner of the backyard drew my attention, the area Danny had warned me about in Protocol 4, where the old well used to be. The ground there did look different, softer somehow, like the earth had been disturbed recently. I walked closer, staying a few feet back from the area Danny had marked as unstable. The grass grew differently here too, greener and thicker, as if something underneath was feeding it. "You the new caretaker?" I turned to find a man in his 70s watching me from the fence line. Short and stocky, wearing a Mets cap and a flannel shirt despite the heat. His yard backed up to the property, separated by a chain-link fence that looked like it had been there since the 70s. "Vincent Torino," I said, walking over to shake hands through the fence. "Just started yesterday." Lou Benedetto. Been living here since 73. Watched every family come and go from that house. He nodded toward 112 Ocean Avenue. "You seem more sensible than most. How long you planning to stay? Depends on how it goes, I guess. The pay is good. Lou laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. They always pay good for that house. Has to be good considering. Considering what? You don't know? Lou studied my face, looking for signs I was playing dumb. The family's son, the ones who lived there, DeFeos got murdered in their beds. Lutz's ran out in the middle of the night, left everything behind. Family after that lasted 6 months before the wife had a nervous breakdown. Then came the Rileys. Nice people. Kids about your daughter's age. They made it almost a year. What happened to them? Husband found his wife in the basement one morning, standing in front of a wall that shouldn't have been there. She was pressing her hands against it, talking to someone on the other side. Said her mother was trapped back there, needed help getting out. Problem is, her mother had been dead for 15 years. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. And the caretakers? Danny was the third one in 5 years. First guy, Jimmy Castellano, quit after 2 weeks. Said the house was trying to make him do things he didn't want to do. Second one, a kid from Huntington named Tyler. Lasted about a month before he just stopped showing up. Danny made it longest, almost 2 years. Tough kid, grew up in Lindenhurst. But he called me the night before he left. Said he couldn't take it anymore. What did he tell you? Lou looked around, making sure no one else was listening. Said the house was getting worse, more active, like it was testing him, seeing how much he could handle before he broke. Said he'd been following some kind of rules, but they weren't enough anymore. I thought about the protocols in my back pocket. Did he mention specific rules? Something about staying out of certain rooms, not answering doors at night. Smart kid. If he says there are rules, you follow them. Lou adjusted his cap. Danny left me his number. Said if another caretaker moved in, I should help keep an eye on things. You want it? I already had Danny's number, but I nodded anyway. Lou walked back to his house and returned with a slip of paper. The number was the same one I'd called that morning. One more thing, Lou said. That spot where you were standing, where the grass is different, that's not where the old well used to be. The well was over by the oak tree, got filled in decades ago. Don't know what's under that soft ground, but I've seen things fall into it. Toys, tools, sometimes bigger stuff. None of it ever comes back up. I spent the rest of the morning doing basic maintenance around the house. Changed a few light bulbs, tightened some loose cabinet handles, checked the water pressure in all the faucets. Everything worked fine, nothing out of the ordinary. The house felt almost friendly in the daylight, just another old colonial that needed some TLC. Around noon, I decided to test the lawnmower. Suffolk Estate Services had left an old Craftsman in the garage, along with basic yard tools. The mower started on the third pull, ran smooth enough. I began with the front yard, working in straight lines like my father had taught me. The front and side yards took about an hour. When I got to the backyard, I made sure to give that southwest corner plenty of space. The mower handled the rest of the lawn fine, cutting through the overgrown grass and weeds with steady determination. I was almost finished when the engine died. Not sputtered or coughed, just stopped dead, like someone had pulled the spark plug. I checked the gas tank, tried to restart it. Nothing. That's when I noticed where I was standing, maybe 6 feet from the soft ground Lou had warned me about. The mower had stopped right at the edge of what felt like a safety zone. I bent down to examine the engine, looking for obvious problems. Everything seemed normal. The spark plug was connected, gas tank still had fuel, oil level looked fine. I tried the starter cord again. This time the engine caught immediately, running smooth as if nothing had happened. I finished mowing the backyard, staying well clear of that corner. The whole time, I could feel something watching me from the house. When I looked up at the windows, they were empty, but the sensation persisted, like being observed by someone you can't quite see. That afternoon, Danny finally called back. "Vincent, got your message? How's the house treating you?" His voice sounded tired, older than I'd expected. "It's been interesting. I found your protocols." A long pause. "You read them?" "Every word. Had some visitors last night around 10:30. Kids playing upstairs." "How did you know?" "Because it always starts with the kids. They're testing you, seeing if you'll follow the rules or try to be a hero." "Did you go upstairs?" "No, stayed in the kitchen until they stopped." "Good. That's good." Danny sounded relieved. "Listen, those protocols aren't suggestions. They're survival instructions. I learned them the hard way, trial and error. Some of that error nearly killed me." "Lou Benedetto said you lasted 2 years. What made you finally leave?" Another pause. Longer this time. "The basement wall, the one I mentioned in my note to Ms. Holloway. It started showing up more often, staying longer. And the things on the other side, they got louder. Started calling my name, saying they knew me. One night, I found myself down there at 3 a.m. with a sledgehammer, ready to break through. That's when I knew I had to get out." My mouth went dry. "What's on the other side?" "Nothing good. Promise me something, Vincent. If you start dreaming about that wall, if you start hearing voices from the basement, pack your stuff and leave. The money isn't worth it. Nothing is worth it." Tuesday started normal enough. I woke up at dawn, made coffee, and called Suffolk Estate Services to report that I'd settled in fine. Ms. Holloway sounded pleased, mentioned that the previous caretakers had usually called with complaints by the second day. "Danny was different," she said. "Very professional. We were sorry to lose him." "Why did he leave?" "Personal reasons. Family matters, I believe. You know how it is." I knew she was lying, but didn't press it. The pay was too good to risk over questions she obviously didn't want to answer. After breakfast, I drove to Tony's Hardware on Merrick Road to pick up supplies. The owner, a heavyset guy named Tony Marconi, recognized the address when I mentioned where I was working. "You're the new caretaker at the DeFeo place?" He whistled low. "Good luck with that, pal. I sold plenty of stuff to the families who lived there over the years. Locks mostly. New deadbolts, window latches, security chains, like they were trying to keep something out. Or in. I bought basic maintenance supplies, caulk, sandpaper, a few replacement faucet washers. Tony threw in a heavy-duty flashlight for free. "Trust me," he said. "You'll need it." The drive back to Ocean Avenue took me past familiar landmarks from my childhood. The Amityville train station where I'd caught the LIRR to summer jobs in the city. Ketchum Inn, where my parents had taken me for dinner on special occasions. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, worn down by decades of strip malls and traffic. Back at the house, I spent the morning replacing weather stripping around the windows. The work felt good. Straightforward problems with clear solutions. By lunch, I'd finished the first floor and moved upstairs to tackle the bedrooms. The sewing room door remained closed. I'd checked it twice that morning, more out of curiosity than concern. The brass knob was always cool to the touch, never any sound from inside. Whatever Danny was worried about, it seemed to be sleeping. Around 2 o'clock, I was working on the bathroom window when I heard water running downstairs. Strange, since I'd turned off all the faucets before coming upstairs. I set down my tools and headed to the kitchen. The sink faucet was running full blast, water gushing into the basin and swirling down the drain. I reached to turn it off, then stopped. The water looked wrong. Not clear like it should be, but tinted with something that made my stomach tighten. Red. The water was running red. I grabbed Danny's protocols from my back pocket and found Protocol 5. If the bathroom faucets start running red water, let them run for exactly 7 minutes, then turn them off. Clean the tub and sink with bleach afterward. This happens about once a month. But this was the kitchen sink, not the bathroom. Did the protocol still apply? The water had turned darker now, deep crimson that reminded me of the time I'd cut my hand on a broken beer bottle. The smell hit me next, metallic and sharp, like pennies left in a hot car. I checked my watch. 2:17 p.m., 7 minutes. I could do that. I went upstairs to check the bathroom. The tub faucet was running too, same red water filling the basin and staining the white porcelain. The smell was stronger here, thick enough that I had to breathe through my mouth. Both faucets ran for exactly 7 minutes. At 2:24, I turned off the kitchen tap first, then went upstairs for the bathroom. The water shut off easily, normal pressure, nothing strange about the handles. I found bleach under the kitchen sink, a half-empty bottle of Clorox that looked like it had been there for months. The red stains came out easier than I expected, disappearing under the bleach like they'd never been there at all. While I worked, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Old pipes, maybe rust flakes stirred up by water pressure changes. The smell could have been iron deposits, minerals dissolved from corroded fittings. Plenty of houses on Long Island had water quality issues. But rust doesn't run that red, and it doesn't smell like fresh blood. I was finishing with the bathroom when my phone rang. Emma's number, which was strange since she was supposed to be in school. "Daddy?" Her voice sounded small, scared. "Emma? What's wrong, sweetheart? Are you okay?" "I'm at Grandma's house. Mommy had to go to work early." She paused, and I could hear Jennifer's mother talking in the background. "Daddy, I had a bad dream about you last night." "What kind of dream?" "You were in a scary house, and there was red water everywhere. You were trying to clean it up, but it kept coming back. And there were people in the basement calling your name, but they weren't really people." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Emma, how did you—" "Mrs. Catalano says hi." "What?" "The lady next door to your house. She says hi." I looked out the bathroom window toward the Catalano property. Mrs. Catalano was in her garden, but she was facing away from me, working on her tomato plants. No way she could see me from there, and no way Emma could see her. "Emma, what lady are you talking about?" "She's standing right behind you." I spun around. The bathroom was empty. Just me, the bleach-stained tub, and the smell of chemicals strong enough to make my eyes water. "Emma, there's nobody here. She says to tell you that the rules are getting stronger, and that you need to be more careful about the basement." The line went dead. I called back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. When I tried Jennifer's cell, same thing. I spent the next hour cleaning every faucet in the house with bleach, even the ones that hadn't run red. The work kept my hands busy while my mind raced. Emma's dream, her impossible knowledge of Mrs. Catalano, the message about the basement, none of it made sense. Unless the house was somehow reaching beyond its walls, touching people connected to me. That evening, I called Lou Benedetto and asked if he wanted to grab a beer at Murphy's Tavern in town. I needed to talk to someone who understood what I was dealing with, and I needed to get out of the house for a while. Lou met me at the bar around 7. Murphy's was exactly what you'd expect from a Long Island dive. Sticky floors, Budweiser on tap, and a crowd of regulars who'd been drinking there since the Carter administration. "So how's day 2 treating you?" Lou asked, settling onto a bar stool. "I had the red water thing this afternoon, kitchen and bathroom sinks." Lou nodded like this was perfectly normal. Danny mentioned that one. Said it happened to him maybe 6 or 7 times while he was there. Always during the day. Always exactly 7 minutes. "What do you think it is?" "Hell if I know. But I'll tell you what I think it isn't. It's not rusty pipes or mineral deposits. I've been a plumber for 40 years, and water doesn't behave like that naturally." I told him about Emma's phone call, about her knowing things she couldn't possibly know. Lou listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of his beer. "That's new," he said when I finished. Danny never mentioned the house reaching out to family members, but it makes sense in a twisted way. The house is testing you, seeing what kind of pressure it takes to break you down. What better way than to involve your kid? So what do? Follow the protocols, all of them, every time, no exceptions. And maybe consider getting Emma some protection. "What kind of protection?" Lou reached into his wallet and pulled out a small card. "St. Christopher, patron saint of travelers. My grandmother gave this to me when I shipped out to Vietnam. Kept me alive for 2 tours. Get something like this for Emma. Something blessed by a priest. It might not stop the house from reaching her, but it could help her fight back." We drank in silence for a while, watching the Mets lose to the Phillies on the television above the bar. Normal problems, normal disappointments. The kind of stuff that seemed impossibly distant from red water and phantom phone calls. "Lou," I said finally, "why do you stay? Living next to that place, seeing what it does to people?" He finished his beer and signaled for another. "Same reason you took the job, I guess. Sometimes you don't have anywhere else to go." Wednesday night brought the first real test. I'd spent the day installing new locks on the basement door, following a work order from Suffolk Estate Services. The old lock had been flimsy, the kind you find on bedroom doors. The new deadbolt was industrial grade, the sort of thing you'd use on a safe room. The work order didn't explain why they wanted it upgraded, but after 3 days in the house, I had my own theories. The basement itself looked ordinary enough in daylight. Concrete walls, wooden shelves holding paint cans and old tools, a newer furnace that hummed quietly in the corner. The only thing that seemed off was the temperature, several degrees cooler than the rest of the house, even with the furnace running. I'd avoided going down there after sunset. Protocol 1 was specific about the hours between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., but something about the basement felt different once darkness fell. Heavier somehow, like the air pressure had changed. Around 9 p.m., I called Emma to say goodnight. Jennifer answered, her voice tight with stress. "Vincent, we need to talk about Emma's phone call yesterday. She said she talked to you while you were cleaning red water. She's never been to Amityville, and she's never met any neighbors of yours." I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're filling her head with ghost stories. She had nightmares again last night. Said there were children singing in her closet. My stomach dropped. "What song?" "Ring Around the Rosie," over and over until I had to sleep in her room. Jennifer's voice got sharper. "Whatever games you're playing, leave Emma out of it." "I'm not playing games. Something strange is happening here, and I think it's affecting her somehow." "Then maybe you should find a different job." The line went dead before I could respond. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I spent the rest of the evening watching television and trying not to think about Emma singing nursery rhymes with invisible children. The late news ran a story about a house fire in Babylon, a water main break in West Islip. The usual local disasters that make you grateful for your own problems. Around 11:30, I checked the crucifix above the bed. Still hanging straight, dark wood catching the lamplight. According to Protocol 8, when it falls, something is about to happen. So far, so good. I was brushing my teeth when the knocking started, 3 soft raps on the front door. Not urgent, not frantic. The kind of polite knock you'd make when visiting friends. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. Protocol 6 was clear. Never answer the front door between midnight and sunrise, regardless of who appears to be knocking. They will sound like people you know. They are not. Technically, it wasn't midnight yet, but close enough that I should probably follow the spirit of the rule. The knocking came again, a little louder this time. I crept to the front window and peered through the curtains. A woman stood on the porch, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a blue windbreaker I recognized immediately. Jennifer, my ex-wife, standing on the porch at 11:45, looking exactly like she had the day we'd signed the divorce papers. She knocked again and called out, "Vincent! I know you're in there. We need to talk about Emma." My hand moved toward the deadbolt before I caught myself. Protocol 6. They will sound like people you know. They are not. But what if it really was Jennifer? What if something had happened to Emma and she'd driven out here in the middle of the night because she couldn't reach me on the phone? "Vincent, please. Emma's in the car. She wants to see the house where Daddy lives." I looked past the figure on the porch and saw a silver Honda Accord parked in the driveway. Jennifer's car. The same dent in the front bumper from when she'd backed into a fire hydrant in Garden City. Through the passenger window, I could make out a smaller shape in the back seat. Emma. My daughter was out there, 20 feet away, and I was hiding behind a door because of some handwritten rules from a guy who'd quit his job and disappeared. "Daddy?" Emma's voice drifted through the door, high and sweet. "Mommy says you have a big house now. Can I see my room?" The rational part of my brain screamed warnings. Real Jennifer would never drive to Amityville at midnight. Real Emma had school tomorrow. Real families don't make surprise visits to creepy houses where 6 people were murdered in their beds. But the father part of my brain, the part that had been aching since the divorce, wanted nothing more than to unlock that door and hold my daughter. I reached for the deadbolt again. The crucifix hit the floor with a wooden thud that echoed through the house. I froze, hand on the lock. Protocol 8. When it falls off the wall, something is about to happen. "Vincent?" Jennifer's voice again, but different now. Flatter somehow, like someone reading from a script. "Why won't you open the door? Don't you want to see Emma?" "I'm scared, Daddy." Emma's voice had changed too. Still recognizably hers, but wrong in ways I couldn't define. "There are people in the basement calling my name. They want me to come down and play." My hand jerked away from the deadbolt like it was electrified. "Vincent." A new voice now, gravelly and male. "Open the door, son. Your family is waiting." I recognized the voice immediately. My father, dead for 3 years, speaking with the same Brooklyn accent he'd never quite lost despite 40 years on Long Island. "Dad?" The word escaped before I could stop it. "That's right, Vinny. Your old man. I know you've been having a tough time since the divorce. Money problems, missing Emma, living in this godforsaken place. But we're here now. Your whole family. We can make it right." Through the window, I saw more figures emerging from the car. My father, looking exactly as he had before the cancer took him. My mother, who died when I was 12. My grandfather, Tony, still wearing the paint-stained overalls he'd worked in at the Navy Yard. "We've been waiting for you, Vincent." My mother's voice, gentle and loving, exactly as I remembered. "Waiting so long. Just open the door and let us in." The figures on the porch stood perfectly still, like mannequins in a department store window. No breath misting in the cool night air, no small movements, no shifting weight from foot to foot. They waited with inhuman patience. "Vincent." Another voice now, one that made my knees weak. Emma, but older. The voice she might have when she was 16, 17. "Daddy, please don't leave us out here. We drove so far to see you." I backed away from the door, stumbling into the living room. The knocking started again, but louder now. Demanding. Multiple hands pounding on the wood, a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. "Vincent." All the voices together now, a chorus of my loved ones calling my name. "Vincent, Vincent, Vincent." The pounding grew violent, like they were trying to break down the door. But the wood didn't splinter, the hinges didn't strain. The sounds were all wrong, like someone hitting a pillow instead of solid oak. I ran upstairs and grabbed Danny's protocols, reading Protocol 6 again by the light of my phone. The margin note said, "Do not test." Underlined 3 times, the pounding stopped abruptly. Then Jennifer's voice again, soft and reasonable. "Vincent, honey, I'm sorry. I know it's late. I miss you. And Emma misses her daddy. Won't you please just open the door so we can talk?" I looked out the upstairs window. The driveway was empty. No Honda Accord, no figures on the porch. Just the streetlight casting circles of yellow light on Ocean Avenue. But the knocking started again immediately, gentle and polite. 3 soft raps, like someone who had all the time in the world. I spent the rest of the night in the master bedroom with a chair propped against the door. The knocking continued until dawn, sometimes urgent, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. The voices rotated. Jennifer, Emma, my parents, even childhood friends I hadn't thought about in years. Around 4 a.m., they tried a new approach. Emma's voice, crying like she was hurt. "Daddy, I fell down. My knee is bleeding. Please help me." That almost broke me. I was halfway to the door before I remembered the crucifix on the floor, the warning that had probably saved my life. At 6:01 a.m., everything stopped. The knocking, the voices, the sense of presence outside the house. I waited another hour before going downstairs to check. The front door was unmarked. No scratches from fingernails, no scuff marks from shoes. Even the peephole looked clear and normal. But when I opened the door to get the morning paper, I found something that made my hands shake. Pressed into the wooden porch, as if someone had stepped in wet cement, was a perfect footprint, small, child-sized. Emma's sneaker print, complete with the star pattern from her favorite Converse high tops. The print led from the door to the edge of the porch, then disappeared. I called in sick to my day job at Suffolk Estate Services, spent the morning researching protection spells and blessing rituals online. By noon, I was driving to St. Joseph's Parish in Amityville, the same church whose crucifix hung above my bed. Father McKenna was in his 70s, with white hair and knowing eyes. When I explained that I needed something blessed for my daughter's protection, he didn't ask questions, just handed me a small silver medal of St. Christopher and muttered a prayer in Latin. "For the little one," he said. "Keep her safe from whatever's following you home." I mailed the medal to Emma that afternoon, along with a note telling her to wear it always. Didn't mention why. That night, I put the crucifix back on the wall, and waited to see what other tests the house had planned for me. Thursday brought consequences. I woke up to find every faucet in the house running red water. Not the controlled 7-minute flow from Protocol 5. This was different. Violent spurts that stained the sinks and tubs like fresh wounds. The smell filled the entire house, metallic and thick enough to taste. I shut off the main water valve in the basement, working by flashlight, because the overhead bulb had burned out sometime during the night. The basement felt colder than usual, and I kept catching movement in my peripheral vision. Shadows that shouldn't exist. Shapes that disappeared when I turned my head. The water stopped immediately, but the stains remained. I spent 3 hours scrubbing with bleach, burning through 2 bottles of Clorox before the porcelain looked clean again. My hands were raw from the chemicals by the time I finished. The house was retaliating, testing my limits after I'd successfully resisted Protocol 6. Danny had warned me about this during our phone conversation. The house got more aggressive when it met resistance. Around noon, Suffolk Estate Services called. Ms. Holloway wanted to schedule a property inspection for Monday morning. Routine maintenance check, she said, but something in her tone suggested otherwise. How are you settling in, Vincent? Any problems we should know about? Nothing I can't handle. Good. The owners are very particular about their property being maintained properly. We wouldn't want any complications. After she hung up, I wondered what constituted complications in her world. Missing caretakers? Families fleeing in the middle of the night? Or something worse? I spent the afternoon researching the house's history at the Amityville Library on Broadway. The librarian, Mrs. Flanagan, knew exactly what I was looking for the moment I mentioned Ocean Avenue. Research project? She asked, leading me to a section marked Local History. Something like that. The files went back to the 1920s, when the house was built by the Sullivan family. Irish immigrants who'd made money in construction during the post-war boom. They'd lived there happily for 30 years before selling to the DeFeos in 1956. Ronald DeFeo Sr. had seemed like the perfect family man. Successful businessman, devoted father, active in the community. The newspaper clippings from the 50s and 60s painted a picture of suburban prosperity, little league games, church fundraisers, family barbecues in the backyard. But there were other articles too, buried deeper in the files. Noise complaints from neighbors starting in the early 70s. Police reports about disturbances at 112 Ocean Avenue. Nothing specific, just mentions of unusual sounds and concerns about family welfare. The final newspaper clipping was from November 14th, 1974, the day after the murders. 6 members of the DeFeo family found shot to death in their beds. Ronald Jr., known as Butch, arrested the following day. What struck me was a detail buried in the 3rd paragraph. Neighbors reported hearing what sounded like children playing in the house at approximately 3:30 a.m., several hours after the estimated time of death. Children playing, like the sounds I'd heard upstairs on my first night. Mrs. Flanagan found me staring at the article. Terrible business, she said quietly. That poor family. Though some folks say the house was always troubled, even before the murders. What do you mean? My mother lived on Merrick Road back then. She used to tell stories about the Sullivan children. Said they complained about nightmares, about voices calling them downstairs in the middle of the night. Of course, people didn't talk about such things openly in those days. I spent another hour reading through property records and police reports. The pattern was clear. Every family who'd lived in the house had reported strange occurrences. Not just the famous ones like the Lutzes, but all of them. Mysterious sounds, temperature drops, electronic devices malfunctioning, and every family had children who experienced nightmares about the basement. By the time I got back to Ocean Avenue, the sun was setting behind the houses across the street. Mrs. Catalano was watering her garden, but she turned away when I waved. The cold shoulder treatment seemed to be spreading among the neighbors. Inside, the house felt different, charged somehow, like the air before a thunderstorm. I checked the crucifix above the bed, still hanging straight, but something about its position looked off, like someone had moved it slightly to the left while I was gone. Around 8 p.m., Emma called. This time, Jennifer let her talk. "Daddy, I got your present in the mail today, the pretty necklace. Are you wearing it, sweetheart?" "Mommy says I have to take it off for baths, but otherwise I keep it on. It makes me feel safe." She paused, and I could hear Jennifer talking in the background. "Daddy," the singing stopped. "What singing?" "The children in my closet. They were singing every night since you moved to that house, but they stopped when I put on the necklace. Mommy thinks I was just having dreams, but I know they were real." Relief flooded through me. Father McKenna's blessing had worked. Whatever connection the house had established with Emma, the St. Christopher medal was blocking it. "I'm glad you feel safer, baby. Keep wearing it, okay?" "I will." "Daddy, are you safe in that house?" Such a simple question, but I couldn't find an honest answer. "I'm being very careful." "Good, because the lady next door says you need to be more careful about the basement." My stomach dropped. "Emma, what lady?" "Mrs. Catalano. She's standing in your kitchen right now, waving at me." I spun around. The kitchen was empty. Mrs. Catalano couldn't possibly see me from her house. Our kitchen windows faced different directions. "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't talk to any ladies who say they know me, okay? Even if they seem nice." "But she's helping you. She says the basement door shouldn't be locked because that makes them angry." The line went dead. I tried calling back, but Jennifer had turned off the phone. I walked to the basement door and examined the new deadbolt I'd installed that morning. The metal was cold enough to sting my fingers, and frost had formed around the lock mechanism despite the mild October weather. According to my watch, it was 8:47 p.m. Still safe hours according to Protocol 1. But as I stood there, I could swear I heard something on the other side of the door. Not footsteps or voices, something softer, like breathing or whispered conversation. The smart thing would be to walk away, follow Danny's protocols, avoid the basement entirely until dawn, and pretend I hadn't heard anything. Instead, I found myself turning the key. The deadbolt opened with a click that seemed to echo through the entire house. I pushed the door open and looked down the wooden stairs into darkness. The basement looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. Tool shelves, paint cans, the humming furnace in the corner. Nothing out of place. But the smell hit me like a physical blow. Roses. Heavy and sweet, like a funeral parlor or a Valentine's Day flower shop. Protocol 7. If you smell roses in the basement, leave the house immediately and do not return for at least 4 hours. I should have run. Should have grabbed my keys and headed for the Friendly's parking lot on Merrick Road, just like Danny's instructions said. Instead, I descended the stairs. The smell grew stronger with each step, so thick I could taste it on my tongue. Roses mixed with something else, earth maybe, or wet concrete. The temperature dropped noticeably, and my breath began to mist. At the bottom of the stairs, I turned on my flashlight and swept the beam across the basement. Everything looked normal until the light hit the far wall. There was a door where no door should be. not the pale, cracked wall Danny had described in his notes. This was an actual door. Old wood painted white, with a brass knob that matched the one on the sewing room upstairs. It stood slightly ajar, and warm yellow light spilled through the gap. I approached slowly, flashlight beam wavering. The rose smell was overwhelming now, mixed with other scents I couldn't identify. Cinnamon, maybe, or incense. Through the crack in the door, I could see part of a room. Hardwood floors, wallpaper with tiny flowers, a rocking chair that looked like it belonged in a nursery, and voices, soft, musical, coming from somewhere deeper in the room. Children's voices, singing a lullaby I remembered from my own childhood. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." I reached for the door handle before I could stop myself. The brass was warm to the touch, almost hot, like it had been sitting in sunlight. Behind me, something creaked. I turned to find the basement stairs had changed. Instead of wooden steps leading up to the kitchen, I saw a steep concrete ramp ascending into darkness. The ceiling above was different too. Lower, supported by thick beams that hadn't been there moments before. I tried to run back up the stairs, but my feet felt like they were moving through thick mud. Each step took enormous effort, and the ramp seemed to stretch longer with every stride. The children's voices grew louder, more insistent. They weren't singing the lullaby anymore. Now they were calling my name, sweet and pleading. "Vincent, Vincent, come play with us. We've been waiting so long." I made it halfway up the ramp before my legs gave out. The flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered down the slope, beams spinning wild patterns across walls that kept changing shape. That's when I saw them. Small figures at the bottom of the ramp, gathered around the door to the rose-scented room. Children in pajamas, their faces pale and expectant in the shifting light. They looked real enough. Solid, three-dimensional, breathing. But their eyes were wrong. Too bright, too knowing. "Come back, Vincent," the little girl in front said. "Don't you want to see our playroom?" I clawed my way up the ramp on hands and knees, pulling myself toward the rectangle of kitchen light above. Behind me, the children began to sing again. "Ring around the rosy," their voices harmonizing in ways that made my teeth ache. I burst through the basement door and slammed it shut, turning the deadbolt with shaking hands. The singing stopped immediately, but I could hear other sounds now. Scratching, like fingernails on wood. They were trying to get out. Friday morning, the house declared war. I woke up to find the sewing room door standing wide open. Protocol 3 was specific. The door must remain closed at all times. If you find it open, close it immediately and leave a glass of salt water outside. Do not look inside while closing it. But I'd already looked. Standing in the upstairs hallway at 6:30 a.m., coffee mug trembling in my hands, I'd seen into the room before I could stop myself. It wasn't a sewing room anymore. Inside was a child's bedroom, complete with twin beds covered in patchwork quilts, a dollhouse in the corner, and stuffed animals arranged on wooden shelves. Sunlight streamed through windows that shouldn't exist, illuminating toys scattered across a braided rug. And sitting on one of the beds, legs swinging like she owned the place, was a little girl in a white nightgown. She looked maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and pigtails and eyes that seemed far too old for her face. When she saw me staring, she smiled and waved. "Hi, Vincent, I'm Mary. I've been waiting for you." I slammed the door shut and ran downstairs to mix salt water, hands shaking so badly I spilled half the Morton container across the kitchen counter. When I returned, the door was open again. This time, Mary was standing in the hallway. "That's not very polite," she said, tilting her head. I just wanted to talk. I closed the door again, set the salt water outside, and backed toward the stairs. When I looked over my shoulder, Mary was following me. "You broke the rules last night," she said conversationally. "You went into our basement. You saw our playroom. You're not real. I'm as real as you want me to be." She descended the stairs behind me, bare feet silent on the wooden steps. The others are angry about the basement. They don't like it when grown-ups come uninvited. But I told them you were just curious. I reached the living room and spun around. The hallway was empty. My phone rang. Lou Benedetto. "Vincent, you okay over there? I saw lights flashing in your windows all night, like you were having some kind of party." "I didn't have any lights on. Red lights, white lights, moving around like searchlights. My wife called the police around 2 a.m., thought maybe there was a break-in. I hadn't seen any unusual lights, but then again, I'd spent most of the night barricaded in the master bedroom, trying not to listen to the scratching sounds from the basement door. Did the police come? Drove by twice, said everything looked normal from outside. But Vincent, if you're having some kind of electrical problems, you should get an electrician out there. Old wiring in these houses can be dangerous." After Lou hung up, I walked through the house checking every light switch and outlet. Everything worked normally. No flickering, no power surges, no sign of electrical problems. But in the bathroom mirror, I caught sight of something that made my knees buckle. Written in the condensation on the glass, as if someone had traced the letters with their finger. "Basement tonight, 3 a.m. I wiped the message away, but it reappeared within minutes. Same handwriting, same placement. No matter how many times I cleaned the mirror, the words came back. Around noon, Suffolk Estate Services called. Ms. Holloway's voice was strained, professional politeness wearing thin. "Vincent, we've had some concerns raised about the property. Noise complaints from neighbors, reports of unusual activity. Is there something you need to tell us?" "Everything's fine here. Our insurance company requires us to investigate any reports of irregularities. We're moving the property inspection up to this afternoon. Someone will be there at 3 o'clock. The line went dead before I could respond. At 2:45, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. 2 men in gray suits climbed out, carrying briefcases and looking like they'd stepped from a government office. The older one introduced himself as Mr. Chen from Suffolk Estate Services. His partner never gave his name. They spent an hour walking through the house, taking notes and photographs. Both men seemed uncomfortable, especially when we reached the second floor. The sewing room door was closed again, saltwater glass sitting where I'd left it. "What's this for?" Mr. Chen asked, pointing to the glass. "Old superstition. Previous caretaker left instructions." The unnamed partner wrote something in his notebook. They exchanged glances but didn't ask follow-up questions. In the basement, both men examined the new deadbolt with unusual interest. The temperature down there had returned to normal. No trace of the rose smell from the night before. But the scratches on the inside of the door were clearly visible. Long gouges in the wood, like fingernails dragging across the surface. "Maintenance issue?" the partner asked. "Probably raccoons. I'll patch it up." They left without saying much, but their body language suggested I wouldn't be working there much longer. Whatever they'd seen or sensed in the house, it was enough to convince them I was a liability. That evening, I called Danny one last time. "Vincent? Jesus, you sound terrible. What happened?" I told him about the basement, about Mary, about the message in the mirror. Danny listened without interruption, occasionally swearing under his breath. "You went into the basement when you smelled roses? Are you insane? I know. I screwed up. But Danny, there was a door down there. A real door, not just a wall. And there were children. Stop. Don't tell me anything else. The more you talk about it, the stronger it gets. His voice was tight with fear. Listen carefully. You need to leave tonight. Right now. Pack your stuff and get out of there. I can't just abandon the job. The job isn't worth your life or your sanity. I lasted 2 years because I followed every protocol. Every time, no exceptions. You broke Protocol 7 on your 4th day. The house has you now. What do you mean it has me? You've seen behind the curtain. You know the secret rooms exist. You've talked to the residents. They're not going to let you leave now. Not unless you fight for it. How do I fight them? Same way I did. You run. Tonight. Before 3 a.m. Whatever that message in the mirror was planning, don't be there for it. But I couldn't run. Not yet. Emma needed the money I was earning here. Jennifer needed the child support payments. And despite everything that had happened, part of me wanted to understand what the house really was. At 2:30 a.m., I sat in the living room with all the lights on. Danny's protocols spread across the coffee table. The mirror message had been specific. Basement tonight, 3 a.m. Whatever was going to happen, they wanted me there for it. The scratching from the basement door had stopped around midnight. Now the house felt expectant, like a theater before the curtain rises. At 2:55, I heard footsteps upstairs. Multiple sets, children running back and forth across the hallway. They were gathering, preparing for something. At 2:58, the basement door unlocked itself. I heard the deadbolt turn, metal grinding against metal. At 3 a.m. exactly, Mary appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "Time to go, Vincent. Everyone's waiting." She looked exactly as she had that morning. White nightgown and pigtails. But her eyes were different now. Hungry. Ancient. Like something that had been waiting decades for this moment. "You promised to visit our playroom," she said. "It's not polite to break promises." Behind her, other shapes moved in the darkness. More children, their faces pale and eager. They filled the basement doorway like a crowd at a theater entrance. "We have so many games to show you," Mary said. "Games that last forever." The front door was 20 feet away. My truck keys were in my pocket. I could run, like Danny had suggested, leave everything behind and start over somewhere else. Instead, I stood up and walked toward the basement door. Some part of me, the curious part, the part that needed to know the truth, wanted to see what was down there. Wanted to understand what had happened to the DeFeo family, to the Lutzes, to all the others who'd encountered whatever lived in this house. Mary smiled as I approached the doorway. "That's better. We've been so lonely." I paused at the threshold, looking down into darkness that seemed deeper than any basement had a right to be. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to stay," she said simply. "Forever and ever, like the others." "What others?" Mary's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked sharp in the shadows. "Come and see." I stepped through the basement doorway and fell into 1974. The children led me downstairs that stretched far deeper than any foundation should allow, past walls lined with family photographs that moved like silent movies. Ronald DeFeo Sr. building a swing set in the backyard. Dawn DeFeo baking cookies in a kitchen that smelled like vanilla and death. The boys playing catch on a lawn that never seemed to brown, no matter the season. "This is where we live now," Mary explained, her hand cold in mine. "Where we've always lived." The basement opened into rooms that couldn't exist. A nursery with cribs that rocked themselves, a playroom where toys moved without children to guide them, a dining room set for a family dinner that would never end. And there, sitting at the head of a mahogany table, was Ronald DeFeo Jr. Still 23 years old, still wearing the clothes he'd worn the night he murdered his family. He looked up when we entered, his eyes holding the same hungry madness I'd seen in Mary's. "Vincent Torino," he said, like we were old friends. "We've been expecting you." The other children gathered around the table. Dawn, Allison, Mark, John Matthew. The DeFeo siblings, forever frozen at the ages they'd died. Their faces bore no wounds, no signs of violence. They looked like any family sitting down for Sunday dinner. "You broke the rules," Butch continued. "That makes you one of us now. House rules." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The basement stretched behind me like a tunnel with no end, and I understood with crystalline clarity that I would never find the stairs again. "We tried to warn you," Dawn said, her 12-year-old voice sweet and reasonable. "The protocols were for your protection, not ours. But you had to know," added Allison. "Had to see what was behind the door, just like all the others." That's when I saw them. The caretakers who'd come before me, sitting in chairs along the walls. Jimmy Castellano from 2 years ago, Tyler from Huntington, and others I didn't recognize. All of them staring ahead with empty eyes, waiting for instructions that would never come. Mary tugged at my hand. "Sit down, Vincent. Dinner's getting cold." But instead of moving toward the table, I pulled the St. Christopher medal from my pocket. The one Father McKenna had blessed for Emma, the one I'd kept as a backup. The silver grew warm in my palm, and for the first time since entering the basement, I felt my will return. "No," I said quietly. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. The children stopped moving, their heads turning toward me with predatory focus. "That's not how this works," Butch said, standing up from his chair. "You saw our playroom. You know our secret. You can't leave. Watch me." I pressed the medal against my forehead and began reciting the only prayer I could remember. The Lord's Prayer my mother had taught me 40 years ago. The children shrieked and recoiled, their perfect faces dissolving into something hungry and desperate. The basement began to collapse around me, walls crumbling like wet sand. I ran toward where the stairs should be, following a thread of silver light that seemed to pull me upward. I burst through the kitchen door as dawn broke over Ocean Avenue. The moving truck arrived that afternoon. I packed my belongings while Lou Benedetto watched from his backyard, nodding approval. Suffolk Estate Services called twice, but I didn't answer. Let them find another caretaker. Emma called while I was loading the last box into my pickup. "Daddy, you sound different. Happy." "I am, sweetheart. I got a new job in Albany. Construction work, good pay. Maybe you can visit on weekends." "I'd like that. Daddy, the lady says goodbye." "What lady?" "Mrs. Catalano. She's waving from your kitchen window." I looked back at the house. The kitchen window was dark, empty, but for just a moment I could have sworn I saw a small hand pressed against the glass. "Emma, wear your necklace always. Promise me." "I promise, Daddy." I drove away without looking back, heading north toward a life where children's laughter meant joy instead of terror, where closed doors stayed closed, and where the only voices calling my name belonged to people who loved me. Behind me, 112 Ocean Avenue settled back into its patient waiting, ready for the next caretaker brave or desperate enough to accept the job. The house always wins, eventually. But sometimes, if you're lucky and smart and protected by something stronger than fear, you can walk away with your soul intact. Sometimes,